I think the most worrying thing Trump said for me was that they are going to now run Venezuela, that the Americans will run Venezuela. Now, none of us like Maduro. Um, I think, there's no way of defending his actions in Venezuela, except that we now find America colonising Venezuela.
At this time, we get the views of two thoughtful people on the news of the day.
And this morning, it's Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine. Morning, Christine.
Good morning.
Good to
Happy
have
New
you.
Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. Lovely to have you on. And also former Conservative Government Minister Paul Scully. Morning, Paul.
Morning, Chloe. Happy New Year to you all.
Happy New Year.
Morning to you both. Happy New Year. First up, President Donald Trump has said America will run Venezuela as it transitions from the deposed President Nicolas Maduro, who arrived in the US overnight following his capture by US forces. The former Defence Secretary Sir Ben Wallace told us why it can't be Trump that takes power in Venezuela, in his opinion.
I think it's more for the community, either the people of Venezuela themselves, or indeed I'd look for some international body to try and help run Venezuela in absence of their president. But you cannot have the person who removes the head of state suddenly deciding who's going to run it, because that sends a very strong signal to President Xi and President Putin.
We'll be getting the reaction to events in Venezuela from Christine and Paul, and ask how Starmer should act and what signals Trump's actions could send to Putin and Xi Jinping. Also, as Reform UK continue to perform well in the polls, the possibility of an anti-Farage coalition on the left is also increasing. Peter Kellner is a pollster. He's the co-founder of YouGov. He told us how tactical voting might shape the next election.
The next election, I think, is going to be almost two different parallel contests. There's going to be a battle between Reform and the Conservatives to dominate the right of centre vote, and there's going to be a contest between Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, as to who's the king of the castle on the left of the political divide. And the government's next time is going to be formed by whichever of those two contests ends most decisively. If Labour claws back a lot of the votes it's lost to these other parties, then Labour has a chance of getting back into the race.
So when we're talking about tactical voting, voting against something rather than for something, is that good for democracy, or does it make a mockery of the system? Plus, we've been discussing whether or not we have put too much emphasis on talking about your feelings. Steve Bleach is a Sunday Times reporter. He told us that perhaps we should challenge conventional wisdom.
There's been this feeling that relationships where you don't discuss your emotions, which is simply shared activity, are sort of painted sort of pathological or less valid. That's simply not the case. They're hugely important for an awful lot of men. But we've routinely underestimated and sometimes, I suppose, belittled friendships that are hugely important to many men, and personally, I think many women as well, where there's an activity they're sharing, and those sort of relationships are as valid and important to us as ones where we are confessional. So have we got too carried away with being emotionally open? Should there be space for different ways of dealing with our emotions? It'll be interesting to talk to Christine and Paul about that. Your thoughts very welcome on all that we're discussing this morning. You can join the conversation by texting 87222, start your message with the word Times. You can email studio@times.radio or send us a WhatsApp 0333 003 2353. It's been 24 hours since we learned the US Special Forces had deposed President Nicolas Maduro. Since then, we've heard from Donald Trump that he plans to run Venezuela as it transitions from the deposed president. I wonder what your reaction is to what has happened over the last 24 hours, Christine and Paul. What kind of signals do you think it sends to China and Russia? There's an awful lot in this. Just your initial reaction, Paul. Do you think it's good news for Venezuela? What about the rest of the world?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think, yes, it is good news for Venezuela. I think for the rest of the world, it is really problematic. I think, looking at the UK leaders' responses, party leaders' responses yesterday, Nigel Farage had was probably the punchiest one, but he was right in the first bit that it contravenes international law. I think he got the wrong conclusion about what it means for the message that it sends to Russia and China. Because if you think Trump has gone in and said, we don't recognise President Maduro as the leader of Venezuela, therefore we can just go in and arrest him. Well, Putin has the same view about Zelensky, that he's not an adequate and an appropriate president for Ukraine. So it just legitimizes that conflict, and we know Trump leans towards Putin in the way he responds to that conflict. And again, for Xi, well, they see Taiwan as part of China anyway, so having a president of Taiwan is illegitimate for them. So again, it's sending the wrong signals. But Trump is all about being this strong leader of the sphere of influence of the Americas. He sees the Americas as American, frankly, and it's his backyard, and he's out just trying to sort out the neighbors there, which actually must just spread fear amongst smaller countries around China and around Russia.
Does it actually matter what message is sent to China and Russia, Christine, because they haven't followed international law on many different occasions anyway? So whilst this might be distasteful, and of course your party leader has expressed his opinions on this to that side of things, and I expect yours are the same, I just wonder whether China and Russia are actually, they'll take notice of it, but will they change their behaviour based on it, do you think?
Well, I think it sends them a message that we don't want to send them, which is Trump quoted the Monroe Doctrine from the 19th century, which basically said America will stay out of Europe, Europe can stay out of the Americas. Now, if you take you propel the Monroe Doctrine forward to now and say that that's what America's doing, what Trump is saying is that we'll stay out of your backyard, Putin and Xi, if you just stay out of the Americas. And it's a way of, if you like, carving up the world in the 21st century. That's a very dangerous message to send to Vladimir Putin because, as Paul says, he could use exactly the same justification for getting rid of Vladimir Zelensky, and the Chinese could use it for Taiwan. But I don't agree with Paul in that I don't think it's good for Venezuela, because I think the most worrying thing Trump said for me was that they are going to now run Venezuela, that the Americans will run Venezuela. Now, none of us like Maduro. I think, there's no way of defending his actions in Venezuela, except that we now find America colonising Venezuela. And as well as sending a message to China and to Russia, that sends a kind of unfortunate message, a dangerous message to other countries with valuable resources that America might want, and that Trump has already said that he regards as American.
And that is part of the big question here, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is this actually all about? What do you think, Paul?
It's about oil. It's not about drugs. Otherwise, there's no way he would have pardoned the former president of Honduras, who was literally in a prison for drug trafficking into America. So it's clearly about oil. Venezuela's got the biggest oil reserves in the world, and so it's very much all about that, and about this strongman scenario, as I said, about being just really carving up that continent of America. Yeah. It's America. He basically sees it as it's got America in the title, therefore it's his business, and forget everybody else. But then what comes? I mean, look, I said about seemingly good for Venezuela, but the seemingly does a lot of heavy lifting in that, because we've got to see what happens in the next few weeks and months, because they. Obviously, Machado, the lady that's just won the Peace Prize, he just dismissed her as, doesn't have the respect in the country, as if that didn't matter because he didn't win the Peace Prize. And it's that you just can't have that sort of approach if you're going to have a realistic future for the people of Venezuela. But then what happens if he starts going into Iran? Is Marco Rubio going to become the next Shah of Iran as well as the president of Venezuela? It's got to stop somewhere. You can't just carve out the world some sort of it almost feels like the gangs of London when you carve up patches into postcodes and that kind of stuff. You just can't run the world that way.
Do you think that's what's going on, Christine? I heard you agreeing with a lot of what Paul was saying there.
I do, actually. I think it's worrying that Trump sees everything with America in its title, or on, who knows, the American tectonic plate. Who knows what he thinks? I mean, he's almost impossibly unpredictable. But Marco Rubio, that Paul mentioned there, I watched the press conference last night, in the early hours of the morning, and Marco Rubio looked uncomfortable with Trump. And you have to wonder how long the Republicans will put up with this, how long it will be before the Republicans begin to think what the rest of us think, that this man is actually dangerous. Because
Well, Jody Vance is famously isolationist, isn't he?
Just one at a time, if you would.
I think there's a difference between isolationist and being expansionist, and I think Trump is actually trying to carve up the world, take those interests which are American and leave the rest to Russia and China, and that's dangerous for the rest of us, because if he's going to take that view, what does it mean for Ukraine? What does it mean for the Balkans? What does it mean for the Baltic states? What does it mean for us? So I do think that there is a huge danger in what Trump's doing. And if he doesn't realise it, which is quite possible, then surely to goodness somebody in the Republican Party will realise it. Surely somebody within his the president's men, as they call them, will recognise the danger to the stability that he's creating.
Paul, let's pick up that question from Christine. What does it mean for us? What should Starmer do? He's sort of had this holding line at the moment that we don't know the full facts. We know quite a lot of facts.
Yeah, we do now. I mean, I think you were saying that earlier.
Yes, but that was yesterday. Yeah,
just before the press conference. The one thing that really chilled me in that press conference was Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of State for Warfare, I think they call him now, and he said our adversaries remain on notice. America can project our will anywhere, anytime, and that is something that can't be left unchecked. So I think Keir Starmer, look, if he's going to be true to himself as a human rights lawyer that's always going on about international law when it suits him, he needs to call out the fact that this is not under, this is transgressing international law. I think, though, for the good of the UK, I think he's got to, if he wants to go further than that, he needs to go with a few other countries. I think if he's just unilaterally channeling his inner human rights lawyer, then I think that's going to be detrimental to the UK. That doesn't mean we should just kowtow to America, but we've just got to be reflective of the actual power balance in the world.
And here in the UK, Christine, perhaps an interesting situation for Lord Hermer, Richard Hermer. He's the Attorney General. He had sued numerous governments for illegal rendition previously, depending on what you think about that. What's your thought on the British perspective in this?
I think we have to meet our European allies. We have to respect the fact that Donald Trump is the democratically elected leader of the United States. We have to work with them on a lot of things. But I think this is an important point for us in our relationship with both the United States and with Europe. We need to turn back more towards Europe and the European Union, and we have to start rebuilding relationships there. I'm not talking about reversing Brexit. I'm talking about our defence. We have to think about the defence of Europe, and we have to think about how we ensure that this doesn't have consequences for members of the European Union and other states in Europe around the Russia that Putin might regard as, his sovereign mother Russia territory. It's a phrase he has used an awful lot in the past. And we have to think about how we now ensure European defence. And that means rebuilding a relationship with Europe and getting closer to our European allies and making sure that NATO is strong.
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher, he needs to look back at Margaret Thatcher when she responded to Ronald Reagan when he invaded Nicaragua, did the same sort of thing there. So you can be robust without just blowing up a relationship.
Christine and Paul are going to stay with us to discuss tactical voting and whether actually that is good for democracy if you're voting against something rather than for something. And also an anthropologist is suggesting that the conventional wisdom of sharing your problems is always the best policy is actually, well, maybe not. Maybe that's not the best thing, certainly for some men. So we'll discuss all of that in the next few minutes. We're going to talk about tactical voting because pollsters now suggest that only tactical voting can save Labour at the next election. It's what it's called a stall, actually, in Reform UK's momentum. And that is the thing that could help Labour potentially navigate a way through to victory. I appreciate we're quite a long way out from a general election. But as we enter a new era of politics, is it a good idea to embrace tactical voting? Christine, where are you on this? Because the whole concept of tactical voting is you're not actually voting for something, you're voting against something. And it does raise the question of whether that is good for democracy.
It depends how you look at it. I mean, my first experience of being encouraged to vote tactically or in fact, I was campaigning, encouraging people to vote tactically, was in Scotland, where we were encouraging people to think about what it meant for the union. And people voted on the issue rather than for political parties. So they voted for the Unionist Party most likely to defeat the SNP. And, to a large extent, it has worked. It depends what you're using tactical voting for. If you want to change the government, then, in the last election, you voted against the Tories in seats up and down the country. But the problem is not with tactical voting, it's with first past the post, because if you have PR, then, you don't need tactical voting, and tactical voting would be completely a very difficult and different concept. But with first past the post, if you say you have a Conservative government and you are a Liberal Democrat and you don't like the Conservative government, but you're in a seat that's a marginal between Labour and Conservative, you're going to vote Labour to defeat the Conservative government. So I don't necessarily see that it's a bad thing. I think it can work well if you do it properly. And I think that the problem is that, what we need is an electoral system which recognises what everybody wants. And with first past the post, we don't really have that.
Paul, but if we had proportional representation, we would get a Reform UK government next time, wouldn't we?
Yeah, you would. And I think I can see the attraction of, or the stronger argument for proportional representation these days when you've got, you don't have a two-party system or a three-party system. You've effectively got a five-party system at the moment. So it's stretching first-past-the-post system to the nth degree, almost to breaking point. But look, tactical voting does have its place, as Christine says, as does negative campaigning. But it's when it goes too far that it becomes a problem. And, you get some politicians tend to push that too far so that it confuses voters, or voters are sort of like getting mixed messages about what they are voting for and against. Christine's absolutely right that last year, or 2024, people voted against the Conservative government. They'd had enough. Problem is, Labour came in without knowing what they wanted, and they're just going to be without a plan and sense of direction. So that's only going to get worse and worse, which will then allow reform. It's interesting that we've got the May elections coming up, and this year and last year. Keir Starmer's already said today, or yesterday in his interview, that the local elections in May this year are not a referendum on national government. Well, that's the exact opposite of what he said every year when he was in opposition. Oppositions always say that.
I'm interested, Paul, that you said there's a place for negative campaigning. That's depressing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, look, because you're effectively telling people, you don't go what you think you're going to get because it's unintended consequences. It's just you should be setting out your stall for a positive vision for Britain and your policies and mandate. But I think there is a place for saying, and by the way, if you go the other way, this is what you're going to get. And and that does play on people's fears. I get that, which is a valid and very potent form of campaigning, but it just needs to be measured. There's a place for it, but only so far.
Do you think there's a place for it, Christine?
I think it's very dangerous. I think where we are at the moment in British politics, with the sort of lack of confidence that people have, you could say, to some extent, as a result of all the negative campaigning we have had in the past decade. If you look back to the Scottish referendum in 2014, and then the European referendum in 2016, they were very divisive. They were very negative, and we've had lots of negative campaigning since then. And if you keep giving people negative reasons for not voting for someone, then you have a very negative politics, and that's what we've got. And I think we need to get away from it and get back to what Paul's talking about, having a positive vision for Britain. I am sick and tired of listening to politicians talking about where everybody else is wrong. I would quite like politicians to start telling me what they want to do. I'd quite like to be able to say to the public, look, this is what we want to do. This is how we want Britain to go forward. This is how we see the economy, rather than constantly bickering and picking at other people.
Let's talk now about an article in the Sunday Times about an anthropologist who's publishing research on how male friendship thrives. He's found for many, certainly the people he's spoken to at a club for people who are involved in steam locomotives, it's a question of quiet companionship rather than necessarily openly sharing. Men versus women, do we express our feelings differently? And should there be a different space for ways of reacting and how we do it? Paul, you're a man. What do you think?
I am. I lost a lot. Yeah. And I think he's absolutely right. He's got a really good point, actually, because men like to don't always want to come out with emotions, and men and women talk very differently to each other. Women often want to talk about their the issues, what's concerning them, their problems, and they want to have a receptive ear. They want to have someone with empathy with them. The problem is, blokes just want to solve a problem.
It's so true.
It's just so, the last thing, it's the kind of thing that, do I look good in this? Well, if there's something, it's that kind of, oh, do I answer it correctly?
No, the answer is always yes, Paul. You don't need to worry about that.
This is why I'm saying this. This is what I've learned in my 57 odd years. And so you need to understand that, appreciate that. Blokes do want to sometimes, I feel happiest just chatting in a pub over a pint, chatting, sort of like going playing football, whatever they play together, that sense of belonging. They don't feel they need to air their problems, but actually having an approach that says you are able to share your problems, you want to. I am a receptive ear, I'm here for you. Then that blend of the two is probably best.
Christine, from your perspective as a woman, do you want people to say to you, here's the problem, here's how you fix it? Or do you just want them to listen to you and to listen to your problems and nod and say, I'm terribly sorry you're feeling that way? Christine, are you there? Christine Jardine? Oh, no, she's not there. We'll never know.
Being reflective and quiet.
She's decided not to share her thoughts on this matter.
I think it is true, though. I think often as women, you just want to talk things through and you don't necessarily want someone to give you a solution, because there isn't always a solution. Sometimes you just want to vent and then say, and people just go, yeah, if they've got an idea, great. But yeah, I think there is often a tendency that men are trying to help by offering a solution, and sometimes women don't want the solution, they want to vent.
But I've been in a position, actually, where one friend I was speaking to said, do you want me to give you what I think the solution to this is? Or are you in a position where you just want to vent and actually just have a chat about it? This was a female friend. And she's actually someone who's very, very focused on, here is the outcome, this is what I want to fix. And on that particular occasion, I just wanted to chat about how bad I was feeling. So it's really interesting, actually, that there are lots of different approaches. Paul, just a final thought on this. I think we have lost Christine, but oh no, Christine is with us now, which is good. Christine, your thought on this, whether you like people who want to solve problems for you or perhaps people who just want to listen.
The thing I hate most is people who say what you should do. Yes. I think it's up to the individual. Everybody's different. I have very close friends that I talk to, but they are the ones who've never told me what I should do. I think it's entirely, as I say, up to the individual. And I'm not a social anthropologist, so I don't see trends. My husband was someone who liked to talk about issues, but a lot of his friends are not. And I think, again, I sound like a cracked record, but it is about doing what is best for the individual. And I think if someone wants to talk about a problem, then listen to them. Or if you want to talk about a problem, find a friend, or if you feel you need counselling, go to a counsellor and talk to them. But on the other hand, if you prefer not to talk about it, if you like to deal with it differently, then do that. But do what suits you. And as I say, please don't tell me what I should and shouldn't do, because that is liable to send me off in the other direction.
I'll never make the mistake of doing that.
You can offer advice. I think there's a difference. Yes. Christine's right. You can offer advice as a friend. If it was me, maybe I'd consider this. But Christine's absolutely right. Someone telling you what to do is just infuriating.
Indeed. Christine, thank you. And Paul as well. Paul Scully there, the former Conservative Minister, and Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrat MP for Edinburgh West. Thanks for joining us this morning on Times Radio Breakfast.